All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Mindgasms. So I'm Andrew, aka RussiaGate Mindgasms, for the purposes of this video. I'm going to talk about the, of course, famous slash infamous appearance of the populist progressive political commentator Krystal Ball, rather, going on Bill Maher's show and demolishing his arguments on RussiaGate. So let's get well. Actually, yeah, a lot of people are talking about the inflation bit on there, and I'm not going to pretend to be an expert on inflation because I don't know that much about it. And since everyone else is talking about the inflation bit, I'm going to talk about this RussiaGate aspect of it. So let's go right into the clip here. Okay, here we go. All right.
Krystal, CNN's new boss wants the network to steer away from sensational, hyper-partisan coverage. Yes, I saw that. CNN, you can't say that, you can't refer to the election as the big lie or Trump's big lie as the big lie. Which again, see, I mean, I'm totally on the page of it was the big lie, but I think that's the right thing.
Yes.
I mean, now you're MSNBC, even though it's sort of like Jack Del Rio. He's totally wrong, but I defend his right to be wrong. Okay. Do you think CNN will actually?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. I mean, I really hate CNN and all those American mainstream TV news networks like MSNBC and Fox News as well. And yeah, them be the lefty ones being so hyperbolic about Trump is not good because it probably antagonizes particularly right-wing people towards being more united with him in particular, I would say. And that maybe that's even a piece of what led to Trump supporters assaulting the Capitol building last year on January 6th and all that terrible shit that happened.
Actually stick with this new plan?
No. I mean, they actually. So, listen,
I think she's right because of the reason she's about to say.
Issue isn't actually with opinion journalism. If you're upfront about what your lens is, no problem with that whatsoever. I do have a problem when it blinds you to facts and honesty. And I think both CNN and MSNBC, their maximalist ideas in terms of RussiaGate didn't end up working. So that's the issue I have there. Will it work? No. Because ultimately, what's going to happen? Trump's going to come back. Guess what's going to rate? The people who go, the furthest in on Trump.
The people have a lot of different opinions about this, and they all seem very sure of themselves. That one of these is her opinion that Trump. I don't know if what she means exactly by Trump being back, but it seems like she obviously means that he's going to be reelected in 2024. And I think that would be a terrible thing because I'm not one of these like Trump derangement syndrome, super anti-Trump people, but especially with the Trump supporters storming the Capitol and his election fraud claims that are bullshit and all that kind of shit. I think it would be terrible for him to be president again. And I forget what it was, but there's apparently a constitutional amendment that could have prevented him from ever seeking political office again. And that would have apparently made more sense than impeaching him because an impeachment is a political process rather than a legal one. And obviously impeaching him for that didn't work anyway. But yeah, I think she's right about what will happen if Trump comes back into office in terms of the consequences of MSNBC ramping up the Trump derangement syndrome shit.
Trump, that's what's going to get the best ratings. This is a business. It's a business model. I think it's an abhorrent one that leads to a disaster for America. I think it's a cancer on society, all of the cable networks. But ultimately, those are the incentives they respond to. So, no, I don't think it's.
So, what do you mean by maximalist ideas about Russia?
Like the P-tape stuff, MSNBC.
Steele dossier.
MSNBC floating.
Yeah, this is where they're getting into the RussiaGate shit.
That he's been a Russian asset since 1985. All that sort of stuff.
I mean,
yeah.
The Senate Intelligence Committee, which is controlled by Republicans, said that Trump's involvement with Russia was a grave national security threat.
Okay, but
that's not the same as collusion, though. He was under impeachment for literal collusion with Russia, and the Mueller report, if I understand correctly, in the impeachment process, did not find any criminal wrongdoing or literal corruption or collusion or anything like that. There were some suspicious things, but nothing that amounted to anywhere near as much of a serious problem as particularly lefties on CNN and MSNBC painted it to be.
That's not the same as saying Putin has a P-tape and servers are bouncing back and forth.
Yeah.
P-tape was always lurid, and who knows? I mean,
if you don't like that one, then let's talk about the lab leak and the idea of where the coronavirus came from and the fact that these outlets said that not only could it no way could it come out of the lab, but that's racist to say. So
I've been all over
that's what I'm saying is I haven't.
Yeah, they agree about the lab leak theory being shut down by META, even though it's apparently very likely to be true now. I've seen him in his comedy special and other segments, and when he was on Joe Rogan's podcast, he was agreeing with him about that whole aspect. I'm critical of some of Rogan's like anti-vaccine or vaccine skepticism shit because I don't think he understands the science properly behind that. But the lab leak theory seems it's at the very least much more likely to be true than used to be the case.
Have an issue when your ideology blinds you to facts.
I have that issue every week on this show.
Yes. Yes, I don't have an issue with opinion journalism.
But the idea that Russia and Trump were inappropriately intertwined. I mean, his campaign manager Manafort was sharing polling information with this guy Kalimnik, who was
the Mueller report found that there was no collusion. And
there you go.
We were promised this for 3 years.
They overpromised,
and it was really in cable news.
But there wasn't nothing.
News every
so there was circumstantial, suspicious stuff going on. But Trump is not competent enough to have actually done full-on collusion and corruption with Russia and stuff. And I think that he wanted to be Trump's buddy or Putin's buddy rather, because he's like a strong, tough guy, and he admires how much of a dictator he is, and because Trump has such an enormous ego, he wants to be a dictator, but Putin didn't want to be his buddy enough. And of course, all of he was like triggered by all the media saying that he was with Putin into governing against Russia and doing things when he was in office that antagonized Russia to get back in the media for making fun of him because he's an insecure little child.
There wasn't nothing.
Was something else.
There was something.
It wasn't nothing.
But you know what? The truth was bad enough with Trump and Russia.
Correct.
Why did they have to embellish it?
You're right.
Why did they have to embellish it?
What he did in public
was bad enough.
Right.
Yeah.
We disqualified him for the presidency.
Right.
When he said that maybe Russia can keep Crimea. That to me was disqualifying.
How about siding with Putin?
That too.
At Helsinki.
Right.
Like my 17 intelligence agencies tell me one thing. I got to go with you.
It was a disgrace, but they couldn't.
Just side with America. Is that a big ask?
The problem with some.
Still, though, like siding with America means siding with the 17 different intelligence agencies. I mean, can you really trust the FBI and the NSA and all of these other three-letter organizations? I'm not one of those people that thinks that they're all involved in this, like basically this reverse conspiracy theory that they're all involved in collusion and attacking, and they tried to take down Trump together. And I don't think they're all evil, but I do think that they're generally bad and do a lot of bad shit, and I generally don't really trust them. And like, as he's implying that Americans agree that these three-letter organizations represent America, and that is siding with America. A lot of people, especially a lot of lefties in particular, and probably a lot of populist right-wingers too, would fundamentally disagree that agreeing with the three-letter organizations represents agreeing with Americans. But that doesn't necessarily mean that being pro-Putin is a pro-American thing either. People are politically divided on that, right? Like a lot of lefties, like not progressives like Krystal Ball, but liberals like Bill Maher were pro-RussiaGate, and generally speaking, a lot of conservatives were anti-RussiaGate. So it depends on your political affiliation for that. But I don't think that a lot of Americans would think that it's siding with America to side with the FBI and all of these three-letter organizations.
So many people in the media, they couldn't take that alone. It had to be this Baroque conspiracy going back to
Right.
1987. He was recruited by the KGB.
Right.
I mean, it was just,
Yeah.
it was such a scandal, actually. When
like the most extreme versions of this conspiracy theory were that Trump was a secret Russian agent since 1987, and he had been planning for decades to become president in 2016 to help Russia, which is kind of fucking ridiculous to say the least.
when you look back on it, how we were deluded by this.
What we were sold
what
and
we
what
were
the
sold.
reality was were not the same.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone.
But
Yeah.
since he doesn't care about, he's a clinical narcissist.
But our standards should not fall
I know,
because of
but,
him.
But him being, he is a clinical narcissist. I agree with that. But that doesn't mean that he was involved in this massive, fucked up conspiracy theory that was shown to be false, of course.
But the idea that he would do that is completely believable. And he
Yeah,
would.
but of course, the idea that he would believe that, I mean, he would do that is believable. I agree, but he's too fucking incompetent to do so, and he gets bored too quickly. He wasn't able to do what little bit of fucked up shit that he even tried to do.
Would have done it.
Well, that's why people bought it. But
Well,
if you're
yes.
if you're in the news business, I mean, that's
Right.
why
If
I
you're-
think cable
correct,
news
right.
is such a cancer, is because ultimately
Right.
it is just about the
No.
ratings. They don't care they got it wrong. They're
Yeah.
never going to correct
never
the
harm.
issue.
Yeah. I
And
agree
so
more.
is
Right.
that going to change with the new boss? No.
And it's just about
No, it's
saying
not.
the things that make your audience go,
Yep.
yes, I already
Right.
believe that.
Yeah.
Thank you for reinforcing what I
And
believe.
never letting
Yeah.
anything
Never-
outside
not
of the bubble in. And that's
any
Fox News, that's
oxygen.
MSNBC, that's CNN.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. Danny, if you could write a screenplay.
Okay, so I'll stop it there. But yeah, I thought that was interesting, and apparently, like, everyone is talking about this, and this is a big, famous moment for Krystal Ball. And like I said, a lot of what other people seem to be covering is her supposedly debunking his arguments about inflation. And if I understand it correctly, like I said, I'm not an expert on inflation, but if I understand it correctly, inflation is a problem, but it's a bigger problem. The minimum wage is not tracking with inflation. And there was a whole bunch of COVID stimulus. And yes, there were checks given to people to help them when they were not allowed to work. But the vast majority of it, trillions of dollars, went to corporations who did not need the money. And there was a hell of a lot of corporate price gouging. And those were the main culprits of the inflation. But also, inflation is not necessarily as much of a problem as right-wingers claim it to be, yet it is a problem. I don't agree with the lefty argument that inflation is no problem whatsoever. It's a complicated thing. And like I said, I need to learn more about it. But anyway, so this aspect of RussiaGate, I thought it was interesting because I haven't seen anyone else cover this so far. So she also basically destroyed Bill Maher's defenses of RussiaGate and how it was all bullshit. So good for her for that. I'm a fan of Krystal Ball. I'm not as much of a lefty as she is, but she makes really good arguments and good points. And check out her show Breaking Points with Sagar and Jetty. She's a left-wing progressive populist. He's more of a conservative populist, and they agree a lot of the time. But I find it most interesting when they disagree, which doesn't happen enough, in my opinion. Anyway, thanks everyone for watching this. I thought this would be interesting. Hope you found this enjoyable. Check out my last Mindgasms Quickie, which is about Coleman Hughes, the basically political commentator, writer, and rapper who talks about race and policing a lot, arguing with Briahna Joy Gray, who is a former Bernie Sanders campaign advisor and political commentator, and both of them are YouTubers. They're arguing about minimum wage, and I also get into the Marxist economist Richard Wolff explaining labor theory of value, which they reference, so check that out. And check out, probably my next video will be my next continuation of my series on the Hegelian / Lacanian / Marxist philosopher Slavoj Žižek's book called Less Than Nothing, and it'll be on another theological subject about the death of God, not Nietzsche's concept of the death of God, but the idea of killing God to become God, and that the Holy Spirit exists because we believe in it, which is a very interesting perspective, which is always the case with Slavoj Žižek. He always has very interesting perspectives and arguments, so check that out as well. And like I always say, click that like button, share this video everywhere. Click that bell to be notified when I come out with new videos. Check out my Patreon. The link is in the description below. Give me like $1, $5, $10, $100, $1,000 a month. Any amount is greatly appreciated. And like I always say, I love you all. Keep being a tiny beam of light that shines through the almost impenetrable darkness in the universe. And most importantly, always remember this: the funk cures all, and groove is in the heart. And check out this segment, the original full segment on Bill Maher, and see what you think, and see all of people's commentaries on it. It's interesting and worth watching. And check out Breaking Points. It's worth watching as well. And yeah, thanks again, everyone, for watching, and adios until next time.